to a recommended number of projects and types of projects that need to be done for recertification. We are hopeful that ultimately, when that study is completed, those projects can be submitted for potential federal funding, or at least a share of the funding can come from the federal government, potentially. At that time, we would know more about what the local obligation would be. Also, as pertaining to that district I was referring to, there are pieces of legislation now at the state legislature which have been submitted that will be under consideration for the formation of an entirely new district to modernize the way we govern and the way we pay for both the protection of the levee system in the future and also the internal workings within the levee. There's a lot of pumping that has to be done, lots of piping and conveyance of both waters within the levee system, but also some surface water that goes into the levee area. With that, I think I would say that the reason the city of Portland needs to be so involved in this and needs to continue to participate is that we believe it will take a number of years to both form a new district, put a new finance system in place, and be able to do the work that's necessary for recertification of the levees. Secondly, of all of the lives, property value, ecological value, and essential infrastructure that's protected by the levee, the vast majority of it exists within the city of Portland. And so regardless of how this all plays out at some point in the future, the city of Portland has a lot at risk behind the levees. And so another reason for us to be involved. With that, Mr. Mayor, you have the materials. I'd like to stand ready to answer any of your questions, and certainly the folks from Levee Ready Columbia would be happy to do so also.
Very good. Commissioner Hardesty has the first question.
Thank you so much. My question is very short, sweet, and to the point. We're going to create new districts, and who pays for that?
Right. There is a bill before the legislature which would create a new, I'm forgetting the name as I speak.
Water Quality and Flood Safety District.
Thank you. It is a new district under Oregon state statute. It would have the authority to create a utility, and that's the key for the power of this new district. The current funding mechanism under the existing districts is an assessment on property value. That assessment has been deemed a Measure 5 tax. And therefore, what happens is, because of the low value of public property within the districts, read Heron Lakes Golf Course, for instance, because it has very low real market value, because it's not usable for any other use, therefore it goes into compression very quickly, and the financial burden is shifted to other properties, predominantly private properties within these districts. The money that would need to be raised to do the capital work on the levees, if it had to be raised under the current system, would not only be beyond the capacity of those districts to raise the money, but the more they raise, the more inequitably the money is charged to individual properties. We've looked at this for about 2.5 years now and believe that a utility model is the most fair way to allocate the overall maintenance and construction costs for these things. And so the statute before the legislature would not create the utility. It would create the district with the authority to look into a utility. There would be a transition period with an appointed board, which would go through all the methodologies and machinations of seeing how can you fairly allocate these costs through a utility. And only when they found that could be done successfully would there be an elected board and they would hold an election, and the elected board would be able to actually operate the utility over the long term. I hope that makes some degree of sense.
Oh, it did. It
Okay.
actually made a lot of sense. But you still didn't answer my question,
I'm sorry.
like who's going to pay for it? So basically what you're trying to do is spread the cost out to a lot more stakeholders than currently pay for it, right?
In essence, yes. And I can give you very briefly what we've been talking about, because it really would be the transitional board's job to really nail this down. The folks who live inside the levee system now in the floodplain, that they would carry still the bulk of the burden for operations and for capital. However, we would look to potentially spread some of the costs burden for the management of surface water that comes off the uplands and into and has to be conveyed to the Columbia River. We would look to transfer some of that cost to those folks. I might add that within the city of Portland, that cost is already being transferred. The Bureau of Environmental Services pays the drainage districts a little over $600,000 a year for that conveyance cost. So it really would not necessarily be a transfer, because if in fact the utility transferred those costs